All right, Part 1. D.B. Cooper's Floating Ransom.
So picture this. It's 1971, right on the eve of Thanksgiving. A man calling himself Dan Cooper hijacks a Boeing 727 mid-flight, demands $200,000, jumps out into the freezing night sky, and just vanishes, without a trace. It's still the only unsolved skyjacking in commercial aviation history. Now, the legend always paints him as this smooth, James Bond-esque criminal mastermind. But let's look at the science, specifically the number 23. A forensic breakdown actually reveals some massive flaws in his plan. See, when Cooper demanded the money, he didn't specify the denomination of the bills, so the bank just gave him 20s. If he'd asked for hundreds, the cash would have weighed around 5 pounds. Instead, he ended up strapped with 23 pounds of absolute dead weight in ransom money.
And that dead weight? It really paints a picture of just how brutal this jump was. I mean, think about it. It was November 24th. He was jumping into pitch blackness, near freezing temperatures, and literally zero visibility. No goggles, no gloves. At the exit door, 200-mile-per-hour winds were just tearing at him. Plus, out of the parachutes they gave him, he picked the MB-8 military parachute. This thing was notoriously uncomfortable, you couldn't steer it at all, and it deployed incredibly hard. He had absolutely zero control over where he was going, which basically guaranteed the heavy westerly winds would blow him straight toward the surrounding rivers and lakes.
So for almost a decade, crickets. Absolutely nothing was found. Then, jump to 1980. The young boy is digging a fire pit on the sandy banks of the Columbia River, and he unearths 3 bundles of moldy $20 bills, still wrapped in their original rubber bands. The serial numbers matched perfectly. It was $5,800 of Cooper's ransom. But here is the giant puzzle. This money was found more than 20 miles, completely outside of the calculated drop zone. And even weirder, it was located upstream against the natural flow of the local rivers. I mean, how is that physically possible?
Well, science actually gives us a mind-blowing answer here. Paleontologist and citizen scientist Tom Kay analyzed those bills, and he noticed they had degraded and rounded at the edges, exactly like a bar of soap you'd leave in the shower. This proved the money wasn't buried by a person. It degraded while tumbling in water. Based on the flight path, Kay figured out the money bag probably detached in those insane 200-mile-per-hour winds and plunged straight into the fast-moving Lewis River, which feeds right into the Columbia. But again, how did it go upstream? Well, in the 70s, the Columbia was this massive shipping lane. The physics suggest the bag actually snagged on a commercial ship's propeller, got violently dragged upstream against the current, ripped open, and then those specific bundles were deposited right onto that sandbar. It's a perfect forensic teardown of what seemed like an impossible mystery.
So with Cooper, physics completely rewrote the myth. But what happens when the physical reality is actually, well, terrifying? Let's pivot from the Cooper mystery to the dark paranoia of the 1950s intelligence race. You've probably heard of the Manchurian Candidate, right? The idea of a programmed, brainwashed assassin who has no memory of what they did. But what if the science behind this wasn't just Hollywood fiction?
This brings us to a highly classified CIA program run by a guy named Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. The whole goal was to find the ultimate truth drug for the Cold War, because the CIA was absolutely terrified the communists had already mastered mind control. So they started doing what they called unwitting testing. They literally set up safe houses, used prostitutes to lure in targets, and secretly dosed unknowing people. We're talking gangsters, prisoners, even their own employees, with massive amounts of this then obscure drug called LSD, basically just to see what would happen.
Which leads us to Part 2, the Frank Olson assassination.
Back in 1953, Frank Olson, who was an Army biological weapons researcher with top-secret knowledge of these exact covert operations, plunged to his death from the 13th floor of the Statler Hotel in Manhattan. At the time, it was quickly ruled a closed case of suicide. But look at how the truth shifts over time here. In 1975, the Rockefeller Commission blew the lid off the CIA's illegal domestic activities, and they revealed that 9 days before his death, the CIA had actually secretly slipped LSD into Frank Olson's after-dinner drink. Knowing the government drugged their own scientist was shocking enough. But then, in 1994, Frank's son ordered his father's body exhumed. Forensics expert Professor James Starrs examined the remains, and guess what? There were no lacerations on his face like the original medical report claimed. Instead, he found a massive, completely unrecorded bruise above Olson's left eye, which clearly indicated severe blunt force trauma happened before he ever went out that window.
And guys, this is where the forensic reality gets absolutely chilling. In 1953, the exact same year Frank Olson died, the CIA actually published an assassination manual. And the text in that manual advised that if you want to make a murder look like an accidental fall from a high window, agents should, and I quote, stun the subject before dropping them with a blow to the temple above one of the eyes. No way, right? The trauma found on Olson's exhumed skull perfectly matched the CIA's own textbook method for staging a suicide.
It's heavy, dark stuff, for sure, but forensic science doesn't just expose covert assassinations. Sometimes it exposes our own wild imaginations. Let's ask a slightly more fun, maybe absurd question. Could the greatest extraterrestrial cover-up in human history, an event that completely shaped global pop culture, actually just be a story about misplaced Scotch tape?
Let's get into part 3. Roswell's toy company hieroglyphs. All right, let's head over to the New Mexico desert for the mother of all Cold War legends. July 1947. A rancher finds some bizarre debris out in his field, which instantly sparks these massive rumors that the U.S. military had recovered an indestructible alien spacecraft. But here's the hard scientific reality of what was actually up in those skies. Yes, the military was covering something up, but it definitely wasn't aliens. It was Project Mogul. This was a Category 1A top-secret espionage mission, literally classified as highly as the hydrogen bomb at the time. They used these massive, 600-foot trains of high-altitude balloons equipped with acoustic sensors. The whole point was to listen for the sound waves of Soviet atomic bomb tests happening across the globe.
So, when we put the sensational myth side by side with the forensic reality, the pieces just snap perfectly into place. To track these massive balloon arrays on radar, the Project Mogul team used something called Roswell targets. They were essentially these six-pronged, kite-like radar reflectors made out of balsa wood frames, covered in silver foil and backed with a really tough white paper. When the balloons inevitably failed and fell apart, they showered the desert with this exact debris. It wasn't a standard weather balloon, which is exactly why that rancher had never seen anything like it, but it certainly wasn't an interstellar craft either. And here is the absolute aha moment of the whole shebang. What about those famous alien hieroglyphs all the witnesses claim they saw? Well, to build those radar reflectors, the Project Mogul engineers actually contracted a toy manufacturing company in Brooklyn. To reinforce the balsa wood joints, the toy company just used what they had lying around the factory: children's Scotch tape that had a cute little floral pattern printed on it in purple dye. When that debris crashed out in the New Mexico desert, the intense sun literally baked that purple floral dye directly into the balsa wood. So when the tape eventually blew away, it left behind these faded, really bizarre-looking purple symbols. Extraterrestrial language? Nope. It was literally just baked on dye from a kid's tape from Brooklyn.
When you pull back and look at all 3 of these legendary stories, a pretty clear theme starts to emerge. The real conspiracy, the actual driving force behind all these mysteries, wasn't alien intervention, and it wasn't some criminal mastermind's invincibility. It was human paranoia and the intense, almost suffocating, secrecy of the Cold War. The military panicked over exposing Project Mogul. The CIA went to horrifying extremes to protect their mind control secrets. And D.B. Cooper? He was just a desperate guy who vastly underestimated the brutal physics of a Pacific Northwest winter.
These myths are super captivating, absolutely. But the grounded scientific truths, those forensic realities that wait patiently for decades just to be discovered, I think they're infinitely more fascinating. So I'm going to leave you with this to consider. Knowing what we know now about how easily a piece of purple Scotch tape can become an alien language, or how a water current can completely rewrite a crime scene, how easily would you have been fooled by the evidence of the time? Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and just remember that science almost always has the last word. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.